How's it going, everyone? It's Brandon here, and welcome to Pokemon Stadium. For this challenge, I'm going to be trying to beat the Pika Cup with rental Pokemon only. In case some of you may or may not know, in this game you could transfer Pokemon over from your copy of Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow, which meant that you could transfer over your best Pokemon, making Pokemon Stadium a lot easier. But if you didn't transfer Pokemon over, your only option was to use the rental Pokemon, which were Pokemon that the game provided for you. And yeah, a lot of them were pretty bad. Mostly because of a lot of the good Pokemon's movesets were pretty terrible. And the rental Pokemon were at a set level, while your computer opponents could have higher level Pokemon than yours. So today we're going to be trying to take on the Pika Cup, which is supposed to be the lowest level cup and the easiest, but don't let it fool you, because as most people know, this one can be one of the most challenging. And we'll get more into why later on in the video. After trying this challenge out a couple times and seeing how it was, I figured out that some of the best Pokemon to choose were the fastest ones, because getting to go first can be a big advantage. And just as a side note, I'm sure that a lot of people know the strategies and the best Pokemon to use and everything, but I haven't played this game since I was a kid, and I haven't looked up any strategies or any ways to do this. I just did a lot of trial and error and kind of figured things out on my own. So I'm going to go with Starmie first because it's really fast and it has a good moveset as well. Second Pokemon I'm going to go with is Voltorb because having a good electric type on my team that's really fast can be a big advantage as well. I'm going to obviously go with Kadabra because Psychic is really overpowered in Gen 1. Up next I'm going to choose Nidoking because it's one of the strongest Pokemon in Gen 1. For our grass type, we're going to go with Executor. And last but not least, I'm going to go with Mr. Mime, because having another strong Psychic type on the team really couldn't hurt. And with that, it's time to get this challenge started. There's going to be 8 trainers we have to go through to get the Pika Cup. And first up, we have the Bug Boy. And even though we have 6 Pokemon on our team, we can only actually choose 3 of them to battle with. And for his team, he obviously has a bunch of bug types, and an Ekans and a Nidorina. And as you can tell in this game, they actually nickname their Pokemon, and some of the nicknames can be pretty hilarious later on. So in order to decide which 3 Pokemon that you should choose out of your 6, you should just look at your opponent's team, see what the majority of types they have, and choose what 3 Pokemon you think would cover them the best. So for this one, I'm going to start off with Kadabra. For my second choice, I'm going to go with Mr. Mime, and for my third choice, I'm going to go with Nidoking. So he starts off with a Venonat. I start off with Kadabra, which is perfect for me because all I gotta do is use a Psychic, which knocks it out in one hit. For these first few battles, it's just going to be Kadabra using Psychic and knocking everything out. Next, he sends out a Kakuna, in which I do the same exact thing, and down goes the Kakuna. And last but not least, he has his Paris, which gets knocked out in one Psychic as well. And that's the first battle, easy peasy. And with that, we get the Boulder Badge. But unfortunately, things don't stay that easy. It gets a lot more challenging in the later battles, trust me. For the next trainer, we have the Lad. And on his team, he's got Pidgeotto, Farfetty, Sprouty, Ivysaur, Zubatty, and Geodude. And up against his team, I'm basically just going to need Kadabra. So for this battle, I use Kadabra, and he uses Bellsprout. And of course, I just use Psychic, and it kills it in one shot. After that, he tries using a Geodude, which dies in the same exact way. And last but not least, he tries using a Zubat, which one Psychic took that down as well. And that's all there was to that battle. Up next, we have the Swimmer. Now the Swimmer, of course, has mostly water types, and a Nidorino thrown in there for some reason. So the obvious choice to use against this guy is Voltorb. But I also go with Starmie as well because it knows Thunder. So I go into this battle and wouldn't you know it, he picks the one Pokemon that isn't a water type. So that kind of just threw a monkey wrench into my plans. I end up switching out to Starmie, which is why I really should just stuck with Kadabra in there just in case. but I just end up sticking with Starmie anyway and using a Thunder. It does a pretty good amount of damage, and then finishing it off with Psywave. So he ends up using Poliwhirl next, and since Starmie knows Thunder, I kept it out there and tried to hit it with the Thunder, but of course, it misses. Because the move Thunder only actually has a 70% accuracy, which is decently high, but it seems like Thunder misses a lot more often than it should. So I try my luck with Thunder once again, and it actually hits him this time, and actually one-shots him. And his last Pokemon was Wartortle, so I just used Thunder again, and it was an easy win from there. Up next we have the Hamburglar, and this is where the competition kinda starts heating up. No pun intended, because this dude just happens to have a lot of fire Pokemon. I mean, this dude's crazy, he even has Adam Sandler on his team. But of course, seeing as he does have a lot of fire types, I'm obviously going to use Starmie, I'm obviously going to use Nidoking, and then I'm going to throw Kadabra in there just for backup. So he starts off the battle with Ninetales, and Ninetales is a pretty fast Pokemon, and can definitely be considered a threat. But since Starmie is so fast, I actually get to go first, even though his Ninetales is a level higher than I am. Which is another big part of this challenge. The computer's Pokemon continue to be higher and higher level than yours, if you're only using rental Pokemon, that is. Surprisingly, his Ninetales survives my Bubble Beam, so I end up having to use a second Bubble Beam just to take it out. His next Pokemon is Growler, and of course I just end up using Bubble Beam on it, which takes it down in one shot. And I actually felt kinda bad about this one because Growler looks really cute, and I hate hurting it. And last but not least, the man, the myth, the legend, Adam Sandler is in the building. I end up just one-shotting it with Bubble Beam, and that was for all those terrible movies, Adam Sandler. And with that, I ended up defeating the Hamburglar. And now we move on to the final four. That's right, it's time to take on Mr. Fix. Now this battle is where things start getting really challenging, because these final four trainers can be a real pain in the ass. And the biggest threats on his team, of course, are the Porygon and the Raichu. So I'm going to end up going with Nidoking, Kadabra, and Mr. Mime. So he starts off with Voltorb, which is perfect because I have Earthquake. But wouldn't you know it, it ends up using Self-Destruct, which doesn't even kill my Nidoking. So next up he's got Kingler, the old cookie himself. I didn't really expect him to end up picking Kingler, so I just go for the Poison Sting, which ends up poisoning him, and I end up having to switch over to Kadabra. And of course I end up using Psychic, which actually doesn't kill his Kingler, and his Kingler ends up using Body Slam, but luckily it didn't paralyze me, otherwise things would have gone way worse. So the Kingler put up a really good fight, but I ended up killing it with Psychic. Now his last Pokemon, of course, is also his toughest, the Porygon. Now before Kadabra ends up getting defeated, I managed to land a Psychic on it, which took it down to about half HP, and I have one Pokemon left after Kadabra, so things are looking pretty good. So Kadabra ends up going down, and I send out my last Pokemon, which is Mr. Mime. I figured that since Mr. Mime has Psychic as well, it'd be able to take it out in one Psychic, since Porygon was already at half HP. But it doesn't quite get the job done. And then, it happens. His Porygon ends up using Ice Beam, and I get freaking frozen. And I ain't talking about no Let It Go or anything either. No, I end up getting frozen solid, with Porygon at 6 HP left. And Ice Beam only has a 10% chance of freezing you, so I ended up getting really unlucky in this battle. And because of that, I ended up taking my first loss, which really freaking sucked. But that's Pokemon Stadium for you. And it seems like RNG is always stacked against you. It's just the way it goes in this game. So I ended up having to use one of my continues, and it was time for a rematch. He ends up picking Voltorb first again, he self-destructs again, and it's the same thing as the first time. But this time he chooses Porygon as his second Pokemon. I end up hitting it with an Earthquake. It does a decent amount of damage, but of course his Porygon knows Psychic, and ends up taking my Pokemon out. So now all I got left is Kadabra and Mr. Mime. I end up picking Kadabra, hit him with a Psychic, which takes it all the way down to 5 HP, and thankfully he didn't use Ice Beam and try and freeze me again. For some reason he tried using Psychic on Kadabra. It doesn't really make any sense, but works for me, because I end up taking his Porygon out with another Psychic, so everything kind of worked in my favor there. His last pick is actually Mankey this time, which went down in 1 Psychic. So it just shows that RNG is a lot of it, as well as what Pokemon your computer opponent ends up picking out of the 6. You can get lucky and your computer opponent will end up picking like 3, easier Pokemon to defeat, or they might end up picking 3 really tough ones to beat. And up next we have the Hiker. The Hiker actually has a decent variety of Pokemon on his team. You never know what he's gonna pick, so deciding what Pokemon to use against this guy can be kind of confusing. I start off the battle with Exeggutor, and he starts off the battle with Seadra, so I end up getting really lucky, and the battle starts off in my favor. I just use a Mega Drain on his Seadra, and it ends up defeating it, and Mega Drain's a really good move to have in this kind of competition because it does a lot of damage to, water types and such, but it also heals you as well, which is very important because you don't really get any potions or anything to heal your Pokemon with, so being able to heal yourself is a huge advantage. So his next Pokemon is of course Higglytuff, not Wigglytuff, get it right. And since I don't really have any fighting types on my team besides Kadabra's Seismic Toss, I choose to instead use Toxic in order to slowly drain its health down, and use Mega Drain to keep my Exeggutor's health up. And eventually I ended up defeating the Higglytuff. Now for his last Pokemon, he has Highhorn.
Smoke weed every day.
Which for Exeggutor is easy pickings. So now we just have 2 trainers left. And this is where the real challenge begins. That's right, we got the lass from hell. Or at least that's what I like to call her. Reason being, well, you'll see. So for her team, she's got a Gyarados, a Mr. Mime, an Arcanine, Tentacruel, a Dugong, and a Meowth. So with 3 water types, of course I'm thinking Starmie with Thunder, I'm thinking Voltorb. The biggest threats on her team is the level 20 Gyarados, and of course, the level 20 Tentacruel. And the Arcanine can also be kind of annoying as well. And I actually ended up losing to this lass a few times, simply because of the freaking Tentacruel. What happens is the Tentacruel's level 20, so it's 5 levels above your Pokemon, which means that it's going to be faster than your Pokemon. And when it goes first, it knows a move called Wrap. And in Gen 1, Wrap is just so overpowered that it's ridiculous. So what happens is, since Tentacruel's faster than you, it can use Wrap. And then Wrap ends up making you not be able to do anything. And Wrap goes on for more than 1 turn, meaning it continues to damage you, and your Pokemon can't do a thing. And since Tentacruel's faster than you and it goes first every turn, it can just continue to spam Wrap every turn, which kind of gets you stuck in this loop of where you can't do anything. And the only thing you can do is switch your Pokemon out. But if you do that, then the Pokemon that you switch out is likely just going to get wrapped as well. So the best way to get through this is really to just keep switching out your Pokemon and trying to get some hits in. This battle relies a lot on RNG and luck, so I kind of just made my own strategy as I went through attempts at this battle. There's also a chance that she won't pick the Tentacruel at all, so if you get really lucky and that happens, then yeah, be happy about it, because she ended up picking it almost every time that I challenged her. So for my successful attempt, I ended up using Starmie first, and she ended up using Arcanine first. So you think, okay, yeah, I got the advantage on this one, right? Well, wrong. Because she switches out, and guess what she switches out to? The freaking Tentacruel. Of course, but this time I anticipated that, because I ended up making my Starmie use Thunder. But even a Thunder only took this Tentacruel down to half health. So at this point, I just had to hope that Tentacruel didn't trap me in a rap battle again. And it actually didn't. That's right, the Tentacruel ended up using Toxic. It gives me the chance to try and land one final Thunder. And guess what? You guessed it. It misses. And I'm all like,
Why?
and after that, of course, it ends up using Wrap. So now I'm stuck, and I gotta switch out. So I end up switching out to Kadabra. I figured maybe I could get lucky and land a Psychic somehow. And then, it happened. That's right, Tentacruel ended up using Surf instead of Wrap. Now all I needed was for Kadabra to just survive the Surf. With 10 HP left, Kadabra did it. Kadabra survived the Surf. Praise Jesus. And with one final Psychic blow, Kadabra finally took down the beast that is Tentacruel. Now we can finally get on with battling a different Pokemon. Now we already know she has an Arcanine. So what could her other Pokemon choice be? Well, crap. So now she has a Psychic type, and all I have are 2 Psychic types left. Kadabra's pretty much dead at this point, so before he dies I'm just going to try and throw a Seismic Toss out there, which ends up doing a decent amount of damage. So Kadabra ends up going down, my Starmie's already poisoned, and I kind of need to save it for that Arcanine. So it's time to go Mime versus Mime. And basically what happens is, I try and throw a barrier up, and because I just didn't keep attacking him, my Mr. Mime ends up getting defeated. And the only move my Mr. Mime really has that could do some damage is Mega Kick. And Mega Kick's accuracy really isn't that great, so I don't really like using that move. But I ended up landing a hit-in on him at least. So I end up having to throw Starmie out there, which is my last Pokemon, to try and finish it off. Starmie ends up being faster than her Mr. Mime, and I end up taking it out with a Bubble Beam. So now we're down to the final 2 Pokemon of the battle, and it ends up being my Starmie against her Arcanine. So I have the advantage, but my Starmie is poisoned. My Starmie ends up being faster than her Arcanine. Of course I use Bubble Beam, which I was hoping would one-shot it, but it only takes it down to 22 HP. So her Arcanine ends up getting to use Dig. So in order to counter that attack, I end up using Substitute, because I really didn't want to risk the damage with the poison and everything. So the Substitute ended up taking the damage, leaving her Arcanine open to one final Bubble Beam. And with that, I finally did it. That's right, I took down the last from hell. But it's not over yet, because we still have one final trainer left. That's right, the Fisher. And he ain't bringing no Magikarp. He's got a freaking Dragonair. Now I'm not exactly sure why they gave him the Tentacle and not the Tentacruel, since he's the final trainer, but whatever. So getting this far, and I only had like 1 or 2 continues left, I didn't really know what to expect. I just figured that the Dragonair was going to be the most annoying one to deal with. So since he has like 3 water types on his team, I end up starting off with Voltorb. And guess what he starts off with? Of course, the Dragonair. So I just throw a Thunderbolt at it, because I figure, you know, Thunderbolt's pretty strong attack, it might do some decent damage, and yeah, it doesn't really do much damage at all. So Voltorb ends up getting destroyed by a Dragon Rage. So with 2 HP left, there was only one thing to do. That's right, self-destruct. Which ends up taking his Dragonair all the way down to 12 HP. So Voltorb ended up doing a pretty good job. Now all that was left was for Starmie to finish the job. Now I didn't want to risk it with Thunder, so I ended up just using Bubble Beam, because I also have the stab with that. So I figured that would hopefully get the job done, but the Bubble Beam actually ended up critting as well. And with that, the Dragonair was taken down. Now there were only 2 Pokemon left between me and winning this challenge. And he ends up sending out Clefable, or Fableish, whatever. Now I didn't want to take any chances using Thunder, so I just went with the Bubble Beam to be safe. And unfortunately for me, his Clefable knows freaking Thunderbolt, which takes me down to below half HP. And this leaves me with no choice. I've come this far and I gotta risk it. So I go for the Thunder. And even though it was a bit risky, it ends up paying off because the thunder freaking hits. And not only does it hit, it ends up being a freaking crit as well, which took his Clefable all the way down to 7 HP. Then his Clefable ends up thunderbolting my Starmie, which ends up defeating my Starmie. So then I end up going with Executor. And with one Mega Drain, Clefable finally went down. So now it was down to his final Pokemon. Just one Pokemon stood between me and defeating this challenge. Who was it gonna be? That's right, freaking Broish. So of course I just ended up using Mega Drain, which ended up critting as well. Took him down to 13 HP. He ended up using Psychic on me, which hardly did anything. And with that, it was down to the final Mega Drain. So with that everyone, the Pika Cup rental only challenge is complete. And overall, yeah, it was pretty challenging. And I haven't really decided yet, but I might end up doing the challenge for the other Pokemon Cups as well. So if you're interested in seeing that, then be sure and let me know in the comments section below. I want to thank my Patreons for their continued support of the channel. If you want to support the channel, then consider donating on Patreon. It helps keep this channel going. The link for that is in the description box below. If you don't have Patreon, but you still want to support the channel, you can donate by clicking on the Super Thanks button below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, click the bell, and set the notifications to all if you want to see more awesome videos like this one. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Also, if you're new to the channel, be sure and check out some of my other Pokemon videos. My most recent one was talking about creepy backwards Pokemon music, in which I talk about different Pokemon songs and play them backwards, and see just how creepy they sound. I've also done a 50 Things Wrong list with every Pokemon generation, and I've also done videos on other Nintendo games as well. So if any of that content interests you, be sure and go check it out. I'll have the link to the playlist at the end of the video. Thank you all for watching. This has been Brandon, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.